So Siddhartha, the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, it's one of the greatest books ever written. I think Hermann Hesse is one of my favorite authors ever. And it speaks directly to how dissatisfaction fuels the sage to his heights. So this main character, Siddhartha, he was born blessed by the gods. Siddhartha was a prince. He was the son of a great Brahmin, and he was a reflection of the Buddha. He lived during the time of the Buddha. Siddhartha was born with a quick understanding and charisma, great discipline, and he was a source of joy for all. Everyone loved Siddhartha, but he was not a source of joy for himself. Siddhartha sought the Atman. He sought the perfected state, but he only ever glimpsed it. He only ever glimpsed the state of full awakening. And he noticed something. He noticed that even the greatest wise men and the Brahmins all around him were still in the same state as him. They too were asleep. They too did their daily prayers and fasting and sinning and daily atonement for that. They were far from the higher attainment that the holy books spoke of. The Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, these holy books, they spoke of the awakened state. But even the best of the Brahmins were not awake. Everyone slept, and discontentment rose in Siddhartha. A profound discontentment overtook Siddhartha, and he abandoned his princely life in search for the true goal. And therefore he became an ascetic. He went into the wilderness to fast, to deny himself with the other ascetics or ascetics, right? And in their fasting, they lost all this weight, they did all this hard shit, all these mind games, all this inner repression, but it did not lead to awakening. Siddhartha mastered every teaching and every spiritual teaching he could find, and yet he slumbered on, aware that he had not yet awoken. And like the Buddha, he came to this realization point where he realized that repression, the life of the ascetic, is actually not the way. And so he abandoned that path, and he abandoned himself into the world of money and women. He went and he joined the childish people. He made a lot of money. He got into gambling and sex and, love temples. He had a great little time there. And yet he did not find satisfaction. He only found samsara. He only found the wheel of suffering. And the pressures rose inside of Siddhartha. So Siddhartha is painted as this very sensitive young man who is full of divine passions and will. He throws himself into the world of women and wealth and tries to find satisfaction there, but it's deeply unsatisfying to him in the end. He throws himself into the spiritual practices, but it doesn't seem to lead to a goal, only more dissatisfaction, only more seeking. And he comes to this moment of despair, a moment close to suicide, where he is staring into the abyss. All of this searching, it pushed him over the edge until there was only darkness. And only in the darkness did he find the Om. Did he hear the word of God? And the river began its instruction to him. And this led Siddhartha to the awakened goal. Siddhartha became a Buddha. And a Buddha is simply an awakened one. It's one fully, embodying and incarnating the ideal. So this is a very similar story to Gautama, the Buddha himself. You see, Gautama was a prince who lived a life of tremendous dissatisfaction and seeking. So intensely, he also denied himself for years, right? And this dissatisfaction, this spiritual journey that he went on, this spiritual quest, it ultimately led the Buddha, right, to the immovable spot. And there's this great story of the Buddha who wanders to this immovable spot where he sits beneath the bo tree. And he sits there for 49 days and nights seeking the goal. In fact, he made the commitment to himself, I will not remove myself from this immovable spot until I reach enlightenment or die trying. What do you think possessed the Buddha to make such a declaration, other than tremendous dissatisfaction with the world? And in fact, when the Buddha was born, when the awakened teacher came, Buddha's first noble truth is that of dukkha. Life is dissatisfaction, because only dissatisfaction will make you seek. And this is the same exact teaching as the teaching of Christ. What did Christ say? He said, seek, and do not stop seeking until you find. But why would someone seek in the first place? Someone would only seek if they realize that the world is never enough for them. If they come to realize that the restlessness in their soul is a restlessness for God. And instead of repressing the restlessness and trying to be content, spiritual, modern sage, what they do is they actually ride the restlessness to the spiritual heights. They ride the dragons upward. So, this is my argument in this video, is that dissatisfaction is the root of awakening, right? So when you are satisfied, you stagnate. And I actually think this is why satisfaction is so rare on the earthly plane, especially for the sensitive ones. And that is because animalistic well-being, it holds very little value when it's seen from the higher world. I love to be comfortable. I love to be peaceful. Like, I hate all the suffering, temptations, and failures that I've experienced in my life. But at the same time, when I do get really satisfied, like I have I was 6 months ago, I had a girlfriend. I was in a garden paradise. My business was doing well. Like, my body was healthy. Things were going great for me. I got the most depressed I've ever been, I think. This tremendous dissatisfaction rose in my belly. And a lot of people would hear that story and be like, oh, you just got to learn how to be more grateful. You need to learn how to surrender more into the good times of life. And it's like, yes, that's probably true, but there's the other truth that this is actually God incarnating in me, telling me to seek more. This is not the end state. This is not the awakened state. There's more to it. And in fact, the more that we seek animalistic well-being or comfort and pleasure, right, the more we actually degenerate in the higher world. It's a really interesting principle, and this is like kind of the agogic worldview, or I forget the word, never mind. But essentially, the argument here is that there's only one way to higher levels of spiritual growth, and that is seeking, like a search. And for the ones like me, the ones who feel a lot of dissatisfaction and restlessness, like, I want to frame that as a good thing. The temptations, the suffering, the doubts that you feel, this is you learning how to wrestle with the dragon that God gave you, right? And the stronger your dragon is, the stronger your shadow is, the stronger your potential. I went on a journey there for a decade of, I was going to an Ivy League school. I ended up dropping out, going through a long, journey of addiction, of homelessness, of finding myself just wandering the desert, just crying for God, wanting so much more than life had to offer, wanting a tribe, wanting gloriousness around me, wanting to feel connection with God, and going through this insane experience of heaven and hell. Like, if you've ever been, an addict in your life, or you've ever been in a very deep spiritual journey, what it kind of feels like is there is no in between anymore. It's either you're in heaven or you're in hell. And it creates this incredible tension, this incredible suffering inside of you, right? And emerging from that state of suffering, I'm looking back at it, looking back at these years of wandering, these years of restlessness that I had. And I'm just so grateful for them. I'm so grateful for the intensity of that time, because it led to an intensity of a spiritual quest, right? And I believe that any teaching that nullifies the daemon, any teaching that nullifies the intensity in which you live your life, is a teaching that is harmful to your growth. If you're a sensitive young man who feels a deep ambition, who feels the great passions and emotions of life, who lives close to the heartbeat of doubt, of suffering, of love, of pain, of failure, and you want a lot out of life, teachings that deny and repress the feelings and instincts in your soul are not the teachings for you. Those are the teachings for the people who are lukewarm. The people who live hot and cold, you must learn to ride your dragons to victory. And this is one of the hardest paths in life, because those dragons want to consume you, and you will fail 1,000,000 times. But it's in each failure that you start learning the skills. You start learning the internal feng shui and wisdom to actually combat the feelings that you face, the pressures of life well. And that's what enlightenment is to me. It's learning to ride the waves inside of you and the waves outside of you well, and harness all of your psychic energy, harness all of your passions, harness all the energy and vibrance of life towards the goal of awakening. So a lot said there. I don't mean to come off grandiose, my friends. But yeah, I just want to speak to what I see as the truth here. So this idea, what I just described, of harnessing all psychic energy upwards is the idea of transmutation. And this is the base idea of alchemy. Alchemy is the union of opposites. How do you take two opposite forces? For instance, your will to peace and love and the soul. Like my soul that just wants to fish and play and love his family and love his friends. That piece inside of me is in complete opposition to my daemon, who wants power, who wants to live a life of pure adventure, of purpose, of bringing forth his potential. The daemon and the soul are often at odds with each other, right? And it's like, how can you actually merge both into a harmonious and generative tension, right? This is the secret of alchemy, is also of transmutation. How can you take base desires, the base desire of, let's say, lust, right? And when you're feeling a lot of lust, how can you use that to fuel your prayers, to fuel your spiritual quest? My biggest act of transmutation has always been with loneliness. Loneliness has been the main thing I have felt for the past decade in my life until recently. I'm here in Medellin with multiple friends from the Men's Academy, and my life is only going upwards from here. But for 10 years there, I wrestled with loneliness, and so often I'm praying in the wilderness, and God comes to me. He's like, use your loneliness for supreme creative and spiritual practice. Use it to fuel your creative journey, right? Use it to fuel your spiritual quest. So this is the idea of not repressing psychological energies like lust, like temptations, like dissatisfaction or anger, but directing those feelings upward. This is the idea of sublimation that we see in Nietzsche, we see it in Carl Jung, and we also see it in the real and deep teachers of Christianity or Eastern mysticism, is using all energy in life for the goal, right? So essentially, the argument here that I want to make to you is that spiritual growth, it comes from one thing, and that is pressure and heat, okay? We must use heat for spiritual growth. And this is why a lot of the saints got into whipping themselves, which is weird. It might sound weird, but what they were doing is causing pain to sharpen their mind in pursuit of God. I'm not encouraging that practice. That's the practice of the ascetics, right? But there's a lot of different sources of heat we can find in our life, right? So if you look at your own life, like what passions move inside of you? I know for me, sometimes it feels like a monster awakens in me at night that just wants brotherhood, that wants more love, that wants my queen, that wants a glorious mission. Like I feel very passionate sometimes. And it's like, how can I use that passion for my work and for my goal, right? Temptations, if you feel temptation strongly. Addiction, if you feel pain, if you're in chronic pain. I've wrestled with chronic insomnia for many years in my life now, right? Even yesterday, I didn't sleep well. It was a day of fucking suffering. It sucked, right? But I started meditating that night and just like, how can I just use the suck to reach God, right? Same with doubts, dissatisfaction, all desires, all ambition, right? I really despise these philosophies of repression and negation. I want to put forth a philosophy of affirmation and elevation, right? Affirming the darkness you feel inside, affirming the conflicts you feel in your life, and directing those towards your highest personal quest and your highest spiritual quest.